we are joined by the outstanding Neil Coulong. Sir, always a pleasure.
It is indeed. I hope you guys are doing as well as I am on this beautiful day.
It is a beautiful day out. When you get to a camp, somebody has to run with the ones and somebody has to run with the twos. Right? And in the end, at least at this hour, when they go to training camp and everybody's still healthy, it looks like Mitch Trubisky's going to run with the ones and Mason Rudolph with the twos. At least that's how it played out at OTAs. Anything that you heard one way or the other as to what they like, don't like?
No, not really. The first thing Mike Tomlin would say is it's football in shorts. You know, they're not going to get incredibly in depth into it, and you understand why. I mean, it's fairly obvious. To your point, yeah, somebody's got to go with this team, somebody's got to go with that team. You could mix it up if you really want to, but they're not heavily evaluating skill at that point. Most of it, this is one thing I've always kind of taken notice of what Tomlin says in regards to whether it's OTAs or minicamp. What they're trying to do is prepare the players to know what to expect for training camp. Right. And that's the point where Tomlin does his evaluation. He's not really looking at minicamp beyond a conditioning perspective. That's what you hear a lot of the times. The guys at the end of the roster, if they show up even a little bit out of shape, it's not going to fly. They need guys who are serious about it. So they conditioning stuff, you can understand they're looking at that. But as far as who's doing what, installing the offense, all that stuff, it's done at training camp. So in that moment, I think it's really just more get people to know who's around them, what they're doing, and what they can expect come training camp. And I'm sure there will be times we will see Trubisky, Rudolph, and Pickett playing with the ones on offense. Yeah. You know, and we're also using ones here as if this is something that's set in stone. I mean, come on, this is not one of the most outstanding units in the NFL offensively. They have a bunch of new offensive linemen. They drafted 2 new wide receivers. There are a lot of guys that they're going to be mixing in and out in a lot of different situations. I think that it's imperative for them to do exactly that. They need to discover who they can be, what the team is going to be, and how they want to proceed with things moving forward. And I think there's a lot that where we sit and what we're allowed to observe and what we're allowed to even talk about, we don't know yet. You know, I think they have a plan. I think this is an offense that's going to look very different than it did last season. And a large part of that is the personnel that they willingly and intentionally brought in to play a certain way that they weren't in the past. It's going to look a lot different. Obviously, without 7 under center, it's not going to be the same type of look that they've had in quite a long time. And with that, I think they're taking the opportunity to really change schematically what they're trying to do. And those are the types of things they're going to prepare them to work on leading into training camp. So whoever's where right now, it means even less than it has in the past. You get a sense of competition around the whole unit, and it's going to have to be that way because there just aren't very many locks on the team. Certainly not at the depth level. You know, I think we have a very intriguing training camp ahead of us just because of that.
Of course, the running joke I always have is the number of stops I saw Matt Canada at, Indiana, Wisconsin, Pitt, Maryland. Okay. Well, one thing you can tell is that Matt Canada is a very motion-heavy offensive coordinator. How well does that fit Mitch Trubisky?
That's an interesting question. I think it would require a profound answer, simply because motion projects a lot of different things. I don't want to say there's a lot you can do with motion because, you can do whatever you want with or without motion. The idea is putting one person in motion suggests a lot of different things. Yeah. I would say, depending on the skill level of the quarterback and depending on the skill level of the guy who's in motion, the answer to that would come. It's funny to me, there are a lot of people in Pittsburgh in particular who act as if motion is some kind of foreign concept to the team. Right. Antonio Brown ran in motion probably 2 of 3 plays in 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
He was constantly in motion. And a large part of that is, one, he's not very big. You don't want to give them the opportunity to press him at the line of scrimmage if you can help it. And two, he's the most dangerous player of offensive player of the decade, in my opinion. You get that guy on the move, so you can't really reveal exactly what he's doing. And he's going to make the defense change. Needless to say, and I'm choosing my words carefully here, there are certain receivers who might not quite be Antonio Brown, and it won't make much of a difference from that perspective whether he's in motion or not. You don't have to collapse the defense around one guy, so that particular player going in motion doesn't have to mean anything. A lot of it is, what's the word, trickeration. You're showing something that you might not be doing. Seattle did it a lot with Russell Wilson, especially early in his career, and a large part of that was to set up certain read looks for him. Get him the ball, get the ball to a certain guy in space. You're going to misdirect the defense to look this way. It's smart in that sense. I think it's wise of them to do it. I think motion is a necessary component to offensive success, just because they can move, and the defense, while they're able to move, where the defense is and the leverage that they are applying in certain situations is based on where the offense is lined up. If you can change that, if you can mix them up even just a little bit, you've got a wider tactical advantage than you had even before the play started anyway. So to me, you want to be able to get certain players in motion to help set up targets for them, to get them the ball in space and let them be able to run and do their thing. It's to confuse the defense perhaps as to what you're doing. It mixes up tendencies. It's kind of like, don't ask me where this came from. It's a long story, but with desserts, for example, you just kind of put cookie dough into everything now, right? That's the main ingredient. You don't know why. Some people, I'm not one of them, but some people would contend that adding cookie dough to any type of ice cream makes the ice cream better. Motion is not different than that. If you have one basic play and you can run 4 iterations of that, add 2 different guys that can go in motion, now you've got 16 plays out of it. And those are 16 plays that you only have to really practice 2 different ways for most of the team. The core players of the team, your line, your quarterback, are familiar with what the blocking assignment is going to be on this play. Who goes in motion and what the quarterback's read is involves a smaller amount of people on the team. So you can expand your playbook in a more efficient way and create essentially new plays by doing the same things that you've been doing. For a quarterback like Mitch Trubisky, I think that's important. I think that's important because this is me, and I'm going to probably upset a lot of people. I don't feel Mitch Trubisky sees the whole field well. I don't think he gets a great picture of everything that's happening on the field.
I agree with that.
And because of that, this gives him the ability to have a guy moving to a spot that he knows he's going to, and he can make that look and that throw. Physically speaking, he's got a nice arm. I don't think he's terribly inaccurate. Mechanically, I'm not sure how much he's really going to improve in that regard. It's the processing of the entire field. He's not a guy that can go into a high to low read offense and make the right decision based on depth and who's where and process a ton of things at one time. But if you give him motion, he's got some rhythm going into the play. He's got a good sense of where that's going to be, and he knows that if that gets followed, this spot's going to be open. So really, he's looking at 2 things on the play. That makes him more efficient. It makes his decision-making much easier. If a guy, to be blunt, if a guy can't make decisions, the last thing you want to do is give him 5 decisions when you can just give him 2.
Right.
You make the right decision of these 2 and hope that works out. And if they execute properly, the theory is that can work. I would bet that that's probably what they're trying to do with him. He has enough experience to say he can do these 2 things well. If he can't go to 3, 4, maybe even 5, and all right, he's not an all-pro guy. We're not paying him to be an all-pro guy. Make these 2 throws. The rest of the offense is going to contribute to this. I think that's a cost-effective way in the NFL to get some success, especially in a year when you need a bridge quarterback and you just drafted 120 overall. So motion should be a part of Trubisky as well as where the Steelers are trying to go as an offensive team in 2022 and beyond.
By the way, that drafted quarterback is third on the depth chart. It's OTAs. Don't panic. All right. So now we get to, I want to ask about Devin Bush. Saw Bush at Michigan, obviously, a couple times against Penn State. Unquestionably great athlete with speed, no doubt. But also in watching him at Michigan, I felt that I would give him a low grade on instincts. How much did that show up last year, and how badly do they need him to play better instinctive football?
I'm glad you brought that up. I remember you and I talking about that when they drafted him. And the knee-jerk reaction that I would have is the speed piece of it is alluring for sure, especially for a defensive player, especially for the Steelers, who has been on a binge of finding fast defensive players who could hit. Mm-hmm. The Steelers were leveraged in the situation that they were in. We saw what happened when the paper mache Band-Aid that they put to the Ryan Shazier absence broke through against Jacksonville in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. They needed a linebacker with pedigree, with elite athletic skills. They needed somebody. And in retrospect, they probably should have listened to you more in regards to the instinctive part of it. To suggest it showed up last season is underselling it quite a little bit. And it's funny to me because what I go to is I believe it was Merrill Hodge fairly recently, in the last 6 weeks or so. He eviscerated Bush as a player. And you heard his comments and you read over what he's saying. And to be honest, yeah, it kind of matched. I mean, it might have been, some for show in there, but it wasn't far off. And you watch the film, especially if you're looking at an end zone angle, focusing on Bush, especially against the run. A lot of times it's like, what are you doing? Why would you go there? I mean, I don't know how well he saw where the play was developing. And I don't, looking back on it before he got hurt, it wasn't great either. But to me, it was like the injury put a sense of hesitation in his mind. So he no longer had that speed. He didn't have that reactive ability that could have kind of trumped the instinct a little bit. And maybe the Steelers' hope was, we're going to get him a ton of reps. We're going to make it simple for him so he can grow on his knowledge of the game. He was really young. Keep that in mind. I understand his pedigree as far as who his dad was. Mm-hmm. He played at Michigan and all that. You still need reps as an NFL player to really adapt to the speed of the game and what's going on. I think he was more of a project than we probably would have wanted him to be considered, considering what they gave up to get him and where they drafted him. It stuck out like a sore thumb on their defense all season long. And to a point where if Cam Hayward was not playing at literally a defensive player of the year level like he was for half the season, it would have been worse than that complete collapse that they had at the 2/3 way mark. The Chargers game, the Vikings game, they couldn't stop water from running uphill. And Bush was absolutely a big part of that. Joe Schobert didn't help things either. You could see why Jacksonville, was perfectly fine getting out of him, and it wasn't just money. He's a flawed player. I'm not sure what his career is going to look like from this point forward, but they had the worst pairing of inside linebackers in the league. I mean, they were awful. I think the injury took away his superpower. And he had been leaning on that superpower his whole career to that point, and he could get away with it. He was fast enough, he's athletic enough to do the things that a really good inside linebacker would be able to do. Whether he was physically back or not, he'll tell you one thing now, and I'm sure he'll tell you a different thing 3 years from now. Mentally, to me, I hate to say these things, but it looked to me like he might have been a little bit adverse to contact. He wasn't diving into piles. He wasn't playing kind of with that reckless abandon that you need your inside linebacker to play with. And some of that you have to think is he's worried about getting tangled up. He's worried about getting his legs cut out from under him. That's going to slow you down just the active thought, that fear processing in your head slows you down to the point that you're not playing all out. And if he doesn't have that, he can't make up for the fact that he's in the wrong spot. And there were a lot of examples of that. It was bad. I was surprised. Well, I shouldn't say surprised. I don't know what choice they truly had. They had to back him. They had to support him, but it was not a decision that was made on the best thing for the team today. They had to get him out there. They had to get his head right. He was not playing well enough to play as often as he did. And I think in a normal situation, if he was a third-round pick 3 years ago, he would not have continued playing after the midway point of that season. He just wasn't good. Where he'll be now, I don't know. I think that's the question of the season, certainly for their defense. They have a very good defensive team, and they have the opportunity, in my opinion at least, to be an elite-level defense if Bush can play like the player that they hoped that he was going to be. You hope that the lack of option getting picked up, which is a shock. I mean, that takes a lot for you to have traded assets up to 10 overall to take a guy that you don't want after 4 years. You might also argue that the price point of that fifth-year option for an inside linebacker is a tad high. With all the playing time that he's had, you might make that argument. But top to bottom, he did not play well last season, and it's absolutely a prove-it contract year for him. So for his sake and the team's sake, I hope that he's going to be ready to go, and I hope that he's been able to work through some of these things and really figure out who he is as a player. And I wouldn't be surprised if that was kind of, assignment and priority number 1, 2, 3, and 4 for Brian Flores. You got to fix him. We got to get this guy right. And we got to get him playing at a much higher level than we've seen so far.
Yeah, they declined the fifth-year option. That fifth-year option would have guaranteed him $10.9 million. He played 14 games last year. He had 70 tackles. Remember, that's the position that's supposed to be getting 120 tackles. All right. So, Neil, appreciate it very much. Thanks so much, as always, my friend.
Definitely. Thanks for having me.